I'm Julie Baumgardner, and this is the Marriage on the Daily podcast, the podcast designed to give you tools and encouragement to help you do married well on the daily. Because after all, it isn't the grand gestures that make or break your marriage. It's actually what you do or don't do on the daily that either builds a strong foundation or chips away at your core. You can do this, and I'm here to help. Welcome to the Marriage on the Daily podcast. I'm Julie Baumgardner, your host. My guest today is the one and only Ted Lowe. He is an author, speaker, content creator, and longtime friend. He has been married to his lovely bride, Nancy, for 30 years. They have 4 children, ranging in age from 16 to 26. And as I said, Ted has written a number of books, but the one that I really want us to talk about today is called Us in Mind: How Changing Your Thoughts Can Change Your Marriage. Welcome to the podcast, Ted.
So good to be with you, Julie. Good to see you.
It's great to see you. And I am so excited about this conversation. We had lots of conversations before this book was actually finalized. And I love...
helpful, Julie. You were so helpful. You were a pre-reader. You were a pre-reader. And so you are all over this book.
Well, and it makes my heart happy because I believe it wholeheartedly. So would you just tell our listeners, how did you come to the place of writing this book?
I think I started geeking out on neuroscience probably 6 or 7 years ago, and just seeing
geeking out would be an accurate word.
Yeah, it is definitely geeked out. And I try not to be too geeky in the book because I know most people are not geeked out with neuroscience, but I was so fascinated about what's going on in the brain and the body with relationship, when you're having conversations, when you're getting frustrated with each other, and just how all that ties together. And then I watched how that would tie together with marriage research and also scripture. And I've always tied marriage research and scripture, but to add the neuroscience element, it blew me away. And I loved how they just illuminate each other and there's no conflict, right?
Isn't that interesting? I mean, in my years of doing marriage and family work, when you look at the credible research and what scripture says, it shouldn't be mind-blowing, but I just love how the Lord is like, yeah, the truth is truth. No denying that.
He is. And he's like, I told you long before neuroscience and marriage research, but I love how that works out.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you learn? Because I know you've been in the marriage and family world for a long time, and you've been doing a great job of teaching people how to do married well. And this just brings another layer to it because it's speaking to, hey, you really are training your brain how to speak about your spouse, or how you think about your spouse even.
Absolutely. And I did a lot of research on the research, or checked out a lot of the research about couples that are doing really well, that report really high levels of marital satisfaction. And it turns out that they think in a way that unhappy couples don't. And even the brain scans of happily married couples, the average, there's this one study where the married average of 21 years and report being madly in love. How do you like that being a scientific definition? But they had 3 areas of their brain that had higher level of activity than most. And so just how all that's wired, and just really learning just how do we think in a way that helps us to respond in a way that doesn't push our spouse away, but draws them to us. And there's ways we can do that. And I tell people all the time when I say that happy couples think in a way that unhappy couples don't. A lot of people are thinking, well, good for the happy couples. And we're going, no, we can all learn to get intentional with our thought. And that's what the book is all about, is how do we just not let our brain run on autopilot? How do we become intentional with our thoughts? Because we know this in other areas of our life. We know we're going to have a budget that works in our life. We've got to have intentional thoughts about how that's going to happen.
Right.
Or you can take it from the perspective of a coach. He knows if their team's going to win, he's going to have to get his athletes, no matter how athletic they are, in the right mindset. So it was just that simple application over to marriage that actually made things, despite the geekiness of neuroscience, really simple, which I always get excited. Like, how we make all this complex stuff really simple.
I love that a lot, and I would like for you to unpack it. What do we need to know in order to get to that happy couple place?
Yeah. So I give 5 intentional thoughts in the book. The first one that I give is see the best. Julie, there was this incredible study where they asked couples to basically rank their spouse in different categories. It was kind of like a spousal
Gosh.
report card. How you like
Oh
that?
dear.
Sounds dangerous.
That sounds dangerous.
But they had to rank them in categories like patience, kindness, self-control. And what was an indicator of the couples that were the happiest, or ranked the highest level of marital satisfaction, were the ones that ranked their spouse higher in every category than their spouse had ranked themselves. In other words, happy marriage is made up of two people that say, I just wish you could see you like I see you. And so with that in mind, if that's what helps couples, draws them together, then how do you do that? And one of the tools that I give couples, I call it the Philippians 4:8, mindset. Like, what would happen if you just had a piece of paper, or you typed in your computer and you said, what's true about my spouse? What's noble? What's right? What's lovely? What is worthy of praise? And the thing I love about Philippians 4:8 is it starts with truth. So it makes this not rose-colored glasses. It
Yeah.
makes this not dangerous for someone who's being abused, right? Because the truth is, if someone's being abused emotionally or physically, the truth is that's not okay. That has to stop, and that could be a deal killer, right? But for most
Yes.
people, it's not that extreme. And so what is true. And so you can list the things about your spouse that maybe kind of bug you a little bit, but you could also list the things that are true about them, that how faithful they've been to you, or how faithful they are at work, or how kind they've been. Okay, then next is what's noble. And so you just keep going down the line. And I love how Paul ends this. He goes, if there's anything excellent or worthy of praise. Because I think when couples, especially if they're fighting, they can't see anything good. You'd say, well, tell me one thing good. I can't see anything. And sometimes I have to back them up and say, okay, then why did you fall in love in the first place? And then they start thinking about that. But then they start looking. I'll say, okay, you don't see anything right now. Just start looking. Like, I always say, have they wiped something or somebody? Give them credit for that, right? It's you're watching. You start to watching, and you start saying, I'm going to see the best.
Yeah.
And in these moments where we're really, really frustrated and we're really angry, you say, okay, I'm going to see the best, and then I'm going to have the conversation.
I love that.
Gary Smalley, the late, great Gary Smalley, right? He taught us so much, didn't he?
He did.
But he talked about having he had a book with his wife, Norma. And he would just list the things he loved about her. And he'd say, when I have a tough conversation, I read this before I have the conversation. So it just sets you up in a way to have a conversation that says, they love me more than being right. They love me more than our budget working. And so that's one of them, see the best. It's been one of the ones that I really push. And it just resets. It's you thinking about your spouse in the way that you think they should be thinking about you. Right? With all the grace and with all the space and noticing the great things about you. So see the best is one of those.
I love that you talk about the reset because I do think like just even taking a few minutes to do some breathing and to look at that list and remind yourself, okay, this is what I know to be true. And it may not feel like it right in this very moment, but this is what I know to be true. So I think that's great. What's the second one?
The second one is remember who I am. And this is going to sound weird because that can sound self-focused. And in fact, I cut and pasted this out of the book several times because I got real personal about what I think about myself and how that works. And Nancy, I call it Fred in my head. And my Fred is me. And I think we can all have this inner critic. I call mine Fred in my head, and we don't question Fred. We live at as if what he's saying is true. And so I had to really process and like, what does the Lord have to say to me? What does God speak to me? What does the Abba Father say to me? And here's why this is so important, is because what you think about yourself, how you view yourself, greatly impacts who you are and who your spouse experiences, right? So if you're beating yourself up, if you feel like you're listening to Fred and you're no good and you're not worth anything, boy, you're really leaning in on your spouse to be the one to affirm, to push back. And it's sometimes even be God. And so in the book, I talk about how do you get Fred out of your head and how do you start listening to your Abba Father. And that's been one of the most stickiest thing with people. I don't think people have thought to question these thoughts that we have. We have between 16,000 and 64,000 thoughts a day. And scripture is very clear. Take every thought captive. So we have to pause so we can test and approve. And that's been one of the things that's been the most extraordinary for me in my life, is helping to get Fred out of my head so I don't expect Nancy to be more than God intended her to be.
You know what I think about that's so interesting is if you grew up in a home where, or even you experienced this just growing up where people said, you're pushy, you're controlling, you'll never amount to anything, you're no good. I think sometimes we think we come to marriage and all that stuff is just going to kind of melt away. But the truth is, you bring all of you with you. And so if you have those kind of negative things rolling around in your head that you have believed about yourself, you bring that to every interaction in marriage. And you have Fred in your head. And it absolutely greatly impacts what you believe about yourself, which I love what you just said about who am I as a child of God, made in his image. Who does he say I am? Versus this is what everybody has said about me. And that's, what I'm bringing to this discussion that I'm having with my spouse. So, man, that is, I think that is very practical. I also think it takes time, because if you've had Fred in your head for a really long time, he's not going away quickly.
Right. Julie, there is, to speak to the speed of getting Fred out of your head, there's an exercise that's been around for 35 years that research has shown. Most of us don't know about it. And I just took it and made my own version of it about getting Fred out of your head. And, really quickly, you write all those thoughts down. And when you see them, you're like, whoa, wow. Yeah. And you can keep writing. Sometimes I'll keep writing for a long time. And all of a sudden, instead of it feeling like this vague feeling or this fly buzzing around your head that you're no good, you see it. And then you start listing like the categories of, he's got side hustles, like it's a mind reader. Am I being a mind reader? Because last time I checked, I can't read minds. Or, am I shaming? Am I blaming? So categories. And then you look and say, okay, what would my Abba Father say to me in light of this? Mm-hmm. Would he tell me I'm stupid? Would he tell me I'm no good? Would he tell me I'm not going to be okay? He wouldn't. And all of a sudden, there's this sense of, wait a minute, what is true and what is not? And the relief that can be, it's an ongoing process, but it has and I don't say this much about anything. You know me, Julie. It's pretty instantaneous, the relief that you feel when you really reflect on whose you are. It's kind of like when you're having a bad week, you go to church and it changes everything. This kind of resets your brain. We're talking about resetting things, right? This resets how you think about you. And so I get really excited about this. In fact, when churches ask me to speak on Sunday morning, I always speak on Fred in your head because it's been so powerful for me.
Yes. Okay. Do tell. What is number 3?
Number 3 is to choose empathy. Something, Julie, I'm telling you, when I was doing the research on what happy couples do, that word keeps popping up over and over. And Julie, I kept going, empathy. That I've never paid that a lot of attention. I mean, like I've been doing marriage research for 20 plus years. And I'm going, how
Yeah.
have I missed the power of this? Because the word feels a little squishy to me. It
Right.
feels a little, my grandmother, she's so empathetic, and it's super glue for your marriage. And I realized why I kept missing it, because I'm not good at it. I have empathetic thoughts, but my actions, so I'm told, are not always empathetic, because as a guy, I want to fix it. And so I really did a lot of research on like, what does this mean? And empathy, even though it's not natural, it's way simpler than trying to talk someone out of their emotions, which is the reverse of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Our spouse
Mm-hmm.
makes us mad and we're like, look, you don't need to think about it this way. You get so frustrated about this. Why? You just need to see it this way. Look at it this way. If I could go back to young Ted, first 10-year Ted, first 10 months Ted, I would have said, do not try to fix her.
Click for it.
Do not. I know you have phenomenal ideas on how to do that. First of all, they're not as good as you think. Second of all, that's not what she's wanting. There's this fascinating research where one researcher puts it this way. He says, when we're emotional, we're like standing in an emotional puddle. And what we try to do is when we see somebody in an emotional puddle, we try to yank them out with logic. And what they want us to do is step in the puddle with them. And she said to me one night, she goes, I don't want you to fix this. I want you to feel this. And I told her, I said, emotionally for me, that's like seeing you broken down on the side of the road with the kids and me pulling up going, this looks really hard. I'll see you at home. I want to fix it for her.
Yeah.
But just saying the biggest words that we use around here, that's understandable. I'm so sorry. It's understandable. That's hard. I get it. It's so understandable. Those 2 words have changed our marriage, just to say, wow, you're frustrated that I'm late, and that is understandable. You love to be on time, and I get that, and I'm sorry, and that's understandable. Or you're so sad about losing your mom. That's so understandable. I'm so sorry. And we don't get in fix it mode, because the opposite is trying to talk them out of their emotions.
Mm.
And that's got all this relational fallout that leaks onto anything.
All right. Yeah.
But this empathy, it supercharges everything. I wish I'd have known, Julie. So for younger listeners right now, just give it a try. Your spouse will maybe fall down, especially husbands. Your wives will probably hit the ground to see that empathy, but it's so powerful. I wish I'd have known it earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I know about you is you're very genuine. So it's not just the script of, oh, that's understandable, let's move on. It's more of, no. That's like, I get it. That is understandable that you would be really angry at me because I'm late at the moment.
It's got to be genuine with not an ounce of sarcasm. So if you can't say it without sarcasm, don't say anything.
Don't say it.
Don't say it. Take a pause and listen. Sometimes empathy is just looking at them and listening. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think it's true. I mean, probably more so for women. But I think there's also guys out there that would also say, trying to fix it is like, that's not what I need. I'm trying to think out loud and figure it out, which I do think for a lot of people, the empathy piece is helpful because, especially like I know for me, I'm an out loud processor. And so if I start talking about something, I actually got to the place where I finally just looked at Jay and said, I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to be present with me and listen, because I need to get this out in order to know what I think.
So true, Julie. We're the same this way. And I think sometimes we can either ask our spouse, hey, what do you want from me right now? Do you need me to just listen, or do you need me to brainstorm with you?
Yeah.
I think 90% of the time you're going to you're going to get just listen. We think we give advice way too much credit, and we don't give empathy nearly enough. So just try it for a week, and I promise it'll blow your mind.
Well, I think the other thing about that is that when a person has the opportunity, male or female, to walk through it and figure out what I think, what I feel, and maybe even what I want to do, there's some ownership there, and it feels like you accomplish something versus somebody else saying, well, you just need to, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, and if you're married to someone who's an internal processor and they give you 3 sentences and you jump to fixing it, you've just stopped their process, right?
Yeah.
So it's giving them space to do that and being safe to do that. It's important.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So good. Okay. What's the next one?
The next one is, and this one's huge, pause. Just take a pause. That, again, young me, let's go back. When we are triggered relationally, it triggers the amygdala, which is the same area of the brain that's triggered if you see a bear in your bathroom. Your brain doesn't go, this looks precarious, I should probably run. Mm-hmm. No, your brain, thank goodness, has amygdala, and we dart out. You put your hands on the stove accidentally, and the amygdala goes, pull it off. You don't even have to think. That same part of the brain gets triggered with our spouse. Yeah. So it's why we say the things we swore we'd never say again. It's why we get 30 minutes, an hour out, and we go, oh, I cannot believe I said that, did that, acted that way. So when we give this space, this pause, this, like you were saying earlier, when we take a breath, 3 deep breaths can save a marriage, right? Yeah. For those that are, especially if got a short fuse, that you take a breath, you let your brain come back online enough for you to be kind, enough for you to invite God into the process, but just taking a breath and giving space, because that space right after we are triggered is where relationships are built or they're broken. It's right in that space.
Yeah.
And saying you're sorry is great, but not needing to is better. And what a pause does is it gives you the space to be the kind of spouse that you want to be when your brain is online. So those breaths, pause. I've never regretted a pause as a dad or as a husband, and have regretted many times when I did not. And this is not Ted giving this to people, all you short-tempered people. I don't understand it, but I'll give you this thing. This is for me. I have diagnosed ADHD. I know people tease about having it. I really have it, have had it. And so I always say, if I can learn to pause, anybody can learn to pause. Yeah. Comes from taking a breath. So that tool in your toolbox, it can save you a world of hurt and a world of regret.
Yeah. Well, and even in the breathing, you can actually go back to step 1, 2, and 3, because if you go back and you remind yourself about, what is true and what is noble, and then, the reset of who does God say that I am, and you are walking through this process and realizing, okay, let's go with what we know here. And I don't need to try and fix it. I just need to make sure that my brain is online and I am present for the conversation.
Yes. And so many married couples only talk about frustrating things in the middle of frustrating things. They only talk about their differences in parenting when they feel like the other one's done it wrong. They only talk about finances when one of the spouses has spent something we hadn't talked about it. And so your brain and your body's not set up to win. And sometimes that pause is more than a deep breath. Sometimes it's like, okay, let's talk about this when we're set up to win. I think that's why I love marriage retreats and different times, because people's bodies and brains are set up to win, and they're kind of amazed what they can talk about. And they're like, whoa, we've never talked about money without getting angry before. It's because you're only talking about it when the credit card bill comes in. And so sometimes the pause is going, okay, when do you talk well? Is it a walk after dinner? Is it Saturday morning on the second cup of coffee? Like, when's that space where your kids are not in the way, you can breathe, you're not exhausted, and say, hey, we love each other. Now let's talk about this well. We've given ourselves some
Yeah.
space, some time to pray about it, think about it, and let's
Yeah.
see what happens. And it's usually way better.
Yeah. And I mean, as you are unpacking all of these things, I am sitting here thinking, one, I do wish I had known them early on in our marriage. We've come so far and we've learned so much since we all got married. So there's that. But the other thing that I'm thinking about is this isn't hard as much as it is requiring us to be intentional about what we're doing in our marriage relationship.
Yeah, Julie, 100%. I've always felt this, and I think scripture supports this. God's way for marriage is not always easy to live out, but it is easy to understand.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody that's heard anything we're saying today is going to go, well, that doesn't make any sense, or that's too heady, or I don't understand that. I think we all intuitively know taking a pause and a breath is a smart thing to do. It's just not always a natural thing to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We get
But
triggered.
we can be self-disciplined and do it.
Oh, it is God's supernatural way.
Yes.
The natural way is to be triggered and react. The supernatural way is to be triggered and breathe and then respond instead of react.
Yeah.
It's regret management, right?
So true. I love that. Okay. And so what is number 5?
This one I get really excited about, Julie. I think this to me holds it all together. And if we can do this, it's the basis of all of them. And that is love first. And when I think about, that we are all, it's so easy for us to get in scorekeeping mode with our spouse.
Oh boy.
Right? It's your turn. We use those, we can use those terms. Well, it's your turn to go because it's your turn to take out the trash. It's your turn to take the kids to soccer. And we can do that. And I just think we got to love first. I mean, what do we do for those of us who are Christ followers? What do we do with the ultimate act of submission?
Oh.
Is we submit in these little tiny ways to our spouse. And we just go ahead and we just go ahead and love first and try to keep score. Don't try to keep score. I always say people that, when we love first, we're terrible at relational math of whose turn it is. And we just go ahead and in this situation, I'm just going to go ahead and choose to love first. And we're not wired that way, Julie. We're just not. I mean, I always tease, you can see how we're wired when there's a chance of snow. When people go out and they get everything at the grocery store, even things they don't eat, what is it? Eggs and toast and milk. I say, what do you want? French toast every time it's cold. I don't know what that's about, but it's this natural tendency that we have to want to go first. Or our pastor says is mutual submission is a race to the back of the line. And we're not wired this way. We watch the lines at the grocery store to do the shortest one because we want to go first. But when we take a breath and just say, I'm just going to love even today, even when they're not acting very lovely, I'm going to love in a way that at the end of my days and they're describing me, I want Nancy Lowe to be able to say, he would go first. He just loved me regardless if I was being particularly lovely on that day. And I think that when we do that, all those other things are so much easier to do when that's our mindset. I'm just going to love. I'm just going to love because he first loved us.
Yes. And for clarity, back to what you said a bit earlier. In a marriage where someone is being abusive, that is a different story, and we would encourage you. I think you would 100% agree with me that we would
Sure.
strongly encourage you to seek professional help to deal with that. But what you and I are talking about here are marriages that are just doing the day in, day out of being married and experiencing the normal challenges of needing to pay the bills and work and in-laws and children, just all the things that can create moments where we
Exactly.
miss each other. We just miss each other.
Mm,
Because we
ah,
come with different perspectives. And yeah, so
yes.
what does it
Julie,
look like
absolutely.
to love
Amen.
well?
Yeah, and amen and amen. And that's like the Philippians 4:8. Again, it said, whatever's true. Scripture is very clear to start there. And so,
Yes.
very true that if that's happening, if there's abuse happening, please, 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 maybe somebody's listening right now because this is their cue to get help and to
Yeah.
draw the line in the
Yeah.
sand that this is not okay. But like you said, for most of us, if we're living in the day-to-day things, bringing our baggage and our personality into things, these are things that can
All
really
the
help
things.
reset. Yeah. So many
Yeah.
things just to
Yeah.
reset. It's a
Yeah. I
mental
love that.
reset.
Yes. Okay. So I'm curious, because you have worked with a lot of couples. You have done a lot of research. And I mean, the name of the podcast is Marriage on the Daily because we're really clear that it's much more about what you do or don't do on the daily that impacts your marriage over time. So I'm curious what you would say to our listeners. What's one thing that you could do on the daily?
I think if they took one of these five and say, I'm going to try one of these five for a week, because I'll tell people at retreat, say, I'm going to give you five easy thoughts. And I don't care if you just try one of them, so
Hmm.
somebody's listening. So pick one and try it for a week or try it on the daily, and just watch what happens. So for some people, I need to pause and see the best because I'm not seeing the best in my spouse right now. I need to remember who I am. I'm a child of God. And boy, I have not been thinking like that. Maybe for you, that's stopping and doing that for,
Yeah.
for a week. Others going, oh, I need to choose empathy because I keep trying to fix things. Others view like, I need to pause. Or the other one is, I need to love first because I keep keeping score. So I would pick one of those. If somebody said I only could pick, um, one of them today, like if you push me, if you push me on that, I would say the thing that becomes the most apparent and the stickiest of all this is the choose an empathy part. It
Yeah.
is to not fix. Can you imagine if you were having a debate about something with your spouse? I mean, even if couples that are at a tough spot and you start to have an empathy, because it requires you to step into their shoes, which when
Right.
we're fighting, we don't.
Yeah.
We're in our own shoes, locked in,
Yeah.
buckled in. And so
Mm.
I would say today on the daily, that would be one. If you go, I don't know which one of those to choose, try the empathy thing of not fixing
Yeah. Yeah.
and see what happens.
I love so much that you said this because I think reality is it's easy to get overwhelmed. You start trying to remember what all five are, and
Right.
then you're like, "Oh, I'm such a failure. I can't even get it right on the first thing that I try to do it with." So,
Boy.
I think that's encouraging to just try one
Just
for a
one.
while
Yeah.
and see how you do.
You don't
Yeah.
got to plow L5. I mean, we're not wired like that. People are moving a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
And, Julie, I know your heart, and you and I have talked many times about the micro moves. Like, just try one
Yeah.
small thing. Um,
Yeah.
and because it can really be a relationship catalyst, the small thing, in a way that will kind of blow you away a little bit when you see your spouse
Yeah.
respond differently. We change
Yeah.
things. It's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Well, and I also think about just this idea that you might take this to your spouse and say, "Oh, we should try this," and your spouse may be a little hesitant. Um, But I think it's really important to remember that when something changes, everything changes. So yes, it takes two to tango, but it only takes one to change the dance. So you could do it. You could do it as one person, and it changes
Absolutely.
things.
It does. And I have never written one time as a couple you need to, other than parenting, because I can't find anywhere in scripture it says as a couple you need to. I see it,
Yeah.
this individual charge to love in this way. And so that puts the ball back in our court, because boy, we hear things like this and some people are listening going, boy, my husband needs to hear this. Or boy, my wife needs to hear this. I'm so glad he said that. They need to hear this. And I want people to feel this on their own.
Yes.
And try it on their own. Because again, the ball's back in your court, and that's where the power lies.
Yes. Yes. So true. Thank you so much. This has been
Julie,
a great conversation, and I really appreciate you very much. So,
Julie, and I want to say to you, you are one of my heroes. You have been for many, many years. The consistency and the passion and the speed and Julie, I have never seen anybody with more energy in my life. And I love that your energy has been poured into families. And I'm so excited that you're doing this podcast. It's going to help. It's going to have a lot of Julie energy behind it. Anything that's got that engine, we're going to do okay. So I'm excited you're putting it towards this. This is fun.
Thank you. There you have it, folks. See, we're on a ride here together, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's all right.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. You can find Ted's books and other resources on marriageonthedaily.com. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you would share it with your friends, because that's how we grow. And remember, it's the little things that matter on the daily in your marriage.